Hello everyone. Emily Hopeland Squats. Elkstwin, the Kamloops Art Gallery. My name is Emily Hope. I'm the Education and Public Programs Director here at the Kamloops Art Gallery. I've introduced myself in Secwepemchin because that's the language of this land. All of this land, what we refer to as Kamloops and beyond, spanning over 180,000 square kilometers across the interior plateau of what we call British Columbia, the Secwepemchin. Within this vast, spread out territory, the Kamloops Art Gallery is located in Tk'emlúps, the traditional and unceded territory of the Tk'emlúps to Secwepemc. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It's my sincere pleasure to introduce you to Kamloops Art Gallery Virtual Engagement Assistant, Kami Nakashima Ochoa, who will be moderating our conversation over on Facebook. And sorry, I'm just noticing a note from one of my Is that better, Kami? Great. It's my sincere pleasure to introduce you to Kamloops Art Gallery Virtual Engagement Assistant, Kami Nakashima Ochoa, who will be moderating our conversation over on Facebook, and to our guest, Jessica Karuhanga. Jessica Karuhanga is a Canadian Ugandan-British artist whose work addresses issues of cultural politics of identity and Black diasporic concerns through lens-based technologies, writing, drawing, and performances. Through her practice, she explores individual and collective concerns of Black subjectivity, illness, rage, grief, desire, and longing within the context of Black embodiment. Included in this year's Luminosity is her work, Being Who You Are, There Is No Other, in which she subverts common associations with Black bodies in the urban landscape by positioning herself and her collaborator, Alam Hassan, within a pastoral natural landscape. Their brightly colored hair and clothing and rhythmic flowing movements appear in sync with their surroundings and connected to the landscape. Through the inclusion of Black women within nature, Karuhanga recognizes the absence of the Black female body in representations of the Canadian landscape and creates space for Afro-diasporic alterity. She asks, who gets to experience, witness, and revel on the earth here? In what ways can Blackness as urbanity be called into question? We'll begin our program today by watching this video, which is about 15 minutes long, and then come back for a talk with Jessica and finish up with a short Q&A. You can submit your questions here on Zoom through the Q&A box and on Facebook through comments. You can also engage with us in the chat box here and again on Facebook through those comments. You have the option to, in the chat, to share just with the panelists or with the whole group, so you're in control there. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share that video. Okay, I'll hand it over to you, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. So I'm gonna get started. Thank you, all of you, for being with me and one another and this work. So this work is titled Being Who You Are, There Is No Other. And in this work, I really just wanted to explore themes of wilderness and wildness through the vestiges of two Black subjects. Jill Scott Heron is probably one of my favorite musicians, and in one of his songs, he has this lyric where he says, "The blues was built on the American wilderness. It's as American as apple pie. The question is why." And I guess at some point I was listening to this song and thinking about this notion of wilderness and thinking about my childhood playing in the woods behind my nana's house. And I just wanted to stretch out this idea of Blackness into an exploration of what Catherine McKittrick calls the absented presence of Blackness in Canada. The other impulse was honestly, I was just on a walk in Morningside Park when I was teaching in Scarborough, and I was looking at this stream or stumbled upon this creek, and the layouts of the rocks reminded me of this scene from one of my favorite films by the Senegalese filmmaker Mambete called Le Franc. And this is part of a larger series that translates to The Tales of the Little People. And another film in that series is The Girl Who Sold the Sun. And anyway, in this closing scene, this is almost like an African version of The Tramp. So this protagonist wins this lottery ticket, and he glues it to the back, to the door of his slum, of his home in his slum he lives in, and he can't remove it to retrieve it. So you go along with him on this journey where he's carrying around this door, and it's just beautifully shot. And in the closing scene, he washes the lottery ticket off of the door and improvises this beautiful dance. And that movement was really just gorgeous to me. So I had these separate kind of ideas going on at the same time. So for me in this piece, you see these two subjects that are in relation to one another, but they're also in relationship to the site that they're in. And I really wanted to just create this dreamlike alterity in moments of despair. So they're also very ghost-like, meaning that while we are with them, we are also not, as that moment is dead and gone. And we're just kind of experiencing it through the filtration of film as a record or document. And it was really important to me that I directed my second camera person to move as if they were one of us. So the camera has to move, back and forward and to and fro, mirroring our movements. And I really wanted to have different vantage points in a way that could kind of deflect that gaze. So although we're not actually looking back at the camera or we're bringing you into this space, and I really wanted the audience to feel the intimacy of this reverie. And normally when this is installed, although for the sake of Zoom life, I usually have the two channels sort of closer together, projected on walls that can be anywhere from 90 degrees to 180 degrees. I would love to play with this piece in projection mapping, but the idea is to really create this sort of environment or tableau you sort of walk into. So you'll kind of see there's moments where it almost looks like it's one continuous image across the two frames. And at other times they're two different sort of distinct frames or spaces. And the last thing I'll say is I really think of this piece as a visual poem. So I guess to start with, I want to start with right now and move backwards from there. And then rather than begin by talking or explaining what it is that we're looking at, I'm going to attempt to share the works first so we can experience them together, witness them together, and then I can explain a bit of my process after each piece. So I'm going to start with the most recent iteration of a work called Carefree. This is a 23-minute piece. I'm only going to play maybe the final few minutes of it because it just feels like a more compelling moment. It's also still very fresh with me, so I don't know. Ask me how I feel about it in a few weeks or months or years.
Take your vows, make a check, more bigger, never forget them. Spiritual warrior, into the parking lot where we used to spark a lot. Back then we would talk a lot about revolution.
And to come back like they never left there, growing back from all the great skin, glowing, smiling, good job.
Beautiful, I say it isn't, cause back then I thought it wasn't. According to my cousin, I was the ugly person. You taught me self-respect. You make me feel like a queen. Girl, you got that good thing. Man, I love it. Baby, on that wood grain. Should it be the Wu-Tang? Ice cream, chocolate.
To all you guys that's watching, I want to say that you are exceptional and you live an exceptional life. Believe it. Just be so happy in life. Life just be so good.
So this project considers the force of language in shaping your understanding of the world. And for me, it's about how self-affirmation is embodied despite the oppressive conditions of our dispossession and state-sanctioned and institutional violence on Black subjects. So originally this was performed in real life and then earlier this summer over Zoom as a pandemic experiment in a residency I was in. And this iteration that you're seeing a clip of, I made for an online streaming context for part of the Windex Festival. So it was also my first time spending a couple of weeks rehearsing with dancers before performing. A lot of these rehearsals were just spending time with one another, being present with one another. And usually before I do a performance work, I like to spend as much time in the site where I am physically to perform and be. Let me just pause this before. Okay, perfect. So it's an ongoing series and I began it in summer of 2016. And it was my way of dealing with my grief, collective grief. And so in this piece, performers, it's pretty straightforward score, simple score. Performers activate and enact movements in response to a collage of social media images, GIFs, videos, that were archived through the hashtags Carefree Black Girl and Carefree Black Boy. The first time I performed this work was in a basketball court for Big on Blur Festival. I was a last minute addition to a program, and like anyone trying to make an extra dime on a notice, but actually have it connote deeper meaning, I just came to the place as I was, the site as I was. So I collected every video or GIF I could find on Twitter, Vine, Instagram, and started play around with these images as material. So in the video that's used in the performance, you'll often hear sound first, and you'll see the image that matches that sound later on, and vice versa. I'd say about 90% of the material is sound stripped from the videos that you see, and thus the lo-fi quality. But then there are some interventions which might be a mix of my own field recordings. So there's a few moments, this kind of cacophony of horn and brass playing for a kind of climactic moment. And at other moments, you might hear excerpts from interviews. So there's an excerpt from this famous Serena Williams interview where the interviewer is asking her why she's so confident. And of course, her father intervenes later on to kind of tell the interviewer to stop patronizing her. Or this interview with Karuhanga Wallace when she was about to perform or release the new Annie, where she plays the main character. And the interviewer asks her, did you enjoy Annie when you were a little girl, past tense? And her response is, I'm still a little girl. So this for me is part of a larger thing about the unknown or unknowability in relation to Blackness. So, you know, you have a hashtag laughing while Black, all these things that we cannot do or embody or be for prolonged periods of time. Time is also material here. I also love making longer works, stretching and slowing down time. I'll keep a work quiet for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, and then bring in higher pitches of sound or rupture those moments just to be a reminder of the liveness and aliveness of the work. Sorry, losing my place here. So you could place this in an intellectual kind of jargon of hybridity or syncopation and sampling. And I do consider this to be in a larger field of kind of hip hop knowledge or knowing. But it was really important to me to bring to the fore the liveness and aliveness and presence of us as living archives, as being here now. An archive kind of implicates a past tense thing, but I don't have a word for the thing that I want to do. So then Laughing While Black becomes this potent material, and these symbols or codes, these code switches become cues for movement. I'm just gonna share quickly this image from the original iteration of this. So this is when I performed it the first time at Big on Blur Festival. And in the original video, before I added other footage to it, I don't know where that video exists now, but it ended with this person where they're smelling of flowers. So I'm imitating that movement here. And maybe in the last 5 minutes of this performance, a mother was with her daughter and who was restless and couldn't get to sleep, but they heard the sounds from my video as these kind of codes, cues, symbols, and they entered this sort of basketball court. And this child immediately understood that mirroring was the move. And so she began at some point, I don't know when, because I was lost in the performance, but began mirroring my movement. So in this moment, this is just moments before I open my eyes and I see this young child just kind of looking at me like this. And of course, like all the non-Black folk there thought like I contrived this moment because they couldn't imagine, you know, that Black girl magic. So that's all I will say about that piece before I move on to the next work. So the next work I want to talk about is Body and Soul. And I'm going to talk about this piece as it's moving, as you're witnessing it. So Body and Soul is a song title, as I'm sure many of you know. It also speaks to Cartesian subjectivity. But more for me, this work is about the gaze and also the fixation about fissures of surface of skin. Whether this is the white gaze, othering, or even how we revel in one another's sort of presence. Think about seminal texts, Black Skin, White Masks. Think about a lyric from Nina Simone's song Images, where the line is, she thinks her brown body has no glory. In all of these works, flesh, skin, surface kind of means something. So in this work, the flesh becomes a synecdoche for race as a sign of social difference. The disfigured body is a sign of social difference, the medicalized body. In this work, I am breathing kind of slow and meditative, and the sound is meant to not be in conjunction with the rhythm of my body. So when you visibly see it exhale, I'm inhaling. And that, as in a technical sense, was just to kind of remind you that you are seeing a video film piece, and to maybe you and yourself when you're breathing to pay attention to that. So I like to do little tweaks like that, similar to the thing that I was saying about sound earlier. And so it's breathing, it's meditative. It needs to be projected on a surface. That's the only way this work can be experienced. It's not something, I mean, here, of course, you're experiencing it digitally, but I'm kind of cheesily recreating the museum space. And yeah, I wanted to consider the white institutional space, the white walls, the hospital, the gallery, the museum, the cabinet of curiosity, the freak show. And I'm not someone who ever publicly talks about my illness through art, but I cannot recall a single day in my life where I was not gazed at in this kind of extreme, violent way. And it's a weird thing when that is part of your embodiment of knowing from literal inception, you know, like a genetic condition is often caused by a mutation of sorts. So I wanted to present myself as this kind of heap of flesh, but abstraction, devoid of gender, index, trace. This work is also a remake of an original kind of experiment that I did in grad school that I burned onto a CD and lost, but it kind of stuck with me. And I had oddly at a time where I was getting a lot of wonderful, I see someone has raised their hand. If it's a question about this piece, I'll answer it later. What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. Oddly, at a time where I was getting a lot of wonderful opportunities, I was also dealing with some health things. So this piece kept emerging in my head. And so I had this opportunity at the Varley Art Gallery, and I opted to sort of show this work in relationship to this work. So this piece is called Black Hollyhock Presents the Revolution Will Not, that E is a typo. And this piece plays on a sort of television monitor. It's a ceaseless loop. And you see the figure, myself, is wearing this floral kind of dress. And I'm in the video, which I'll play a little excerpt from shortly. I'm kind of scraping off gunk off of the wall to repaint it white. So there's this tension of mark making orally, sonically, while visibly correcting the wall to make it smooth and precious again. And then in the titling, Black Hollyhock is just a reference to a Georgia O'Keeffe painting, which I wanted to reclaim in this kind of Blaxploitation kind of way. And then the revolution will not be televised, I think is what I was thinking about there. So I'll play a little clip of that. Here we go. So the piece goes on for about 15 minutes before just sort of continuing onwards. So the next work that I'm going to talk about is a work called Ground and Cover Me. And this for me was a choreographic rupture to the white institutional space. I'm finally seeing these kind of themes or like threads going through all these works. So again, the score is very simple here. I'm kind of tracing the contours of this narrow white hallway at OCAD University, the walls and windows, while holding a bouquet of flowers in my palms. And so you can see the bouquet there. But these were, they're geraniums, and I just basically pull all the heads off and held them in my hands. And then there's actual kind of pink traces that were on the walls of OCAD afterwards. And this was a commission by a curator, Justine Colel, during her grad studies, her thesis project, where she invited artists to do these interventions into the institution. And I was drawn to this hallway, this white hallway, and particularly this Nora Zeal-Hurston quote where she says, "I feel most Black when I'm thrown against a harsh white background." And just thinking about my and any Black subject's experience in a educational institution, any institution period, to be quite honest. And a lot of these things have actually been coming up again for me through the sort of re-traumatization you experience and watching and witnessing Black death, violence against Black subjects over and over and over again. So in this piece, I have headphones on and I'm listening to Solange's A Seat at the Table, which of course is very fitting in this kind of institutional context. And for me, you know, the headphones are also act as a partition, a separation device, a boundary, but also as a symbol as well. You see folks in their headphones, matching their rhythm to whatever they're vibing to, and they're kind of in their own world, but they are these kind of magical sort of moments. So this performance was about 50 minutes or an hour. And I just kind of, it ended when the music ended or when all the flowers had incidentally fallen out of my hands. And the reason why I chose geraniums was because in researching the history of the AGO in relationship to OCAD, and specifically the Grange, which has gone through all these many phases of development. The gardener of the family named or like conjured a genus of geranium and named it after the family. So something about this colonial claiming that I wanted to sort of undo as well by using these flowers. So a lot of these works I do are very elegiac. So the final work that I want to talk about is called Through a Brass Channel. So to bring kind of things full circle, Through a Brass Channel was also a commission for another curator's thesis project, at this time at the Art Museum. And it was basically two symbiotic solo exhibitions in a way that had to do with movement and dance. And I really wanted to create multiple channels or points of entry of experience. So you would enter this space, and this documentation, lovely documentation done by Lee Henderson, where there would be these sculptural interventions, videos that you could only experience through headphones, sound works, and then live performances happening. So I worked with 4 performers over the course of a few months, and we were in the space for 2 weeks in these, I think, 4 or 5 hour shifts every day. So no encounter or experience of the installation or work would be the same as the other one. So it was a multivalent installation that was about repositioning tender vulnerability and resilience. It was my first sort of collaborative intention where myself with these activators would sculpt time and space through these simple rituals and slow movements. And in closing, I wanted to actually share one of the sound works in this. I don't know that we have time to listen to the entire thing, but I'll play a generous chunk of it. And this piece that we're going to listen to together is titled All of Me. It's a sound work. Ideally experienced listening to it on headphones, but by all means, just play it loudly on your speakers. How you are right now is perfect. And basically this piece is a lament for me that riffs off of Billie Holiday's eponymous song title and Angela Davis's assertion that Black feminism is rooted in the blues, but also R&B's unwavering articulations of longing to be loved, desired, held. So how this piece was initially presented was as a listening booth, which is something that I always loved experiencing going to music stores or record stores growing up. I don't really know that people do these experiments that much unless it's some niche hipster stuff. So without further ado, I'm gonna play a little clip of that.
People ask me all the time, what kind of stories do you want to tell? And I say, exhume those bodies. Exhume those stories. The stories of the people who dreamed big and never saw those dreams to fruition. People who fell in love and lost. Because we are the only profession that celebrates what it means to live a life.
Don't want to think about the past. So like I don't really like to think about nostalgia because it just makes me sad because we don't really have a family anymore. I don't know. Sometimes, like, cause like just when you think about like happy memories with your family, and you remember when your family was happy, and your family's just so not even existent anymore. So thinking about those like happy times where we had like a childhood and we would get in the van and go camping every weekend, and our summers used to be us as a family swimming in the pool and how happy we were. And I guess sometimes you want to think about that stuff because you remember when you were just like purely happy and just didn't have to stress out about the dynamic that your family was in because you felt safe and you felt secure. So I feel like I feel nostalgia for the feeling of when I was a child and I felt secure and safe and happy and I didn't have any care in the world. I really was nostalgic about, not necessarily even nostalgia, just like I yearn for that feeling. And I wish I knew at the time that I should enjoy that feeling because because of all the stuff that was going to happen. And like, I guess it makes me look forward to when I have children of my own. I want them to have those memories and then never let those memories get ruined like the way that those memories have kind of been ruined for me. Yeah.
Is that good? Is that all?
Sure.
There is no time in the past that I want to return to in my life because I have trouble relating to who I was in the past. I can never quite return to that headspace. I experience regret, and time travel for me would be an opportunity to correct those mistakes rather than stay within the same history as it played itself out. My mother is very nostalgic, and growing up, she would always reveal something new about her past and her life. And there are still moments where I discover something new, and she'll tell me something that happened to her so casually, but it would be something so significant to her life. My mother is exiled from her country, and I can't be nostalgic for the culture that she grew up in because it no longer exists. So it's really uncomfortable feeling to know that, you know, your mother's sense of her own identity and her nationality is something that you can't even grasp. And I see that in my generation where my peers are holding on to this image of what they think their nation is, but it doesn't actually exist anymore, and it's heartbreaking. It's a weird space to be in, and I haven't fully made sense of it yet. But that's kind of where I'm at now.
I had this really specific image what like parenthood would look like. It was just kind of this like eating Netflix, just to remind every once in a while. And it was me and a child that I was parenting, and we were like in a living room, and it was nighttime, and we were making a fireplace, just something like cheesy and cozy, and like really fun hockey music playing, and even like thinking about it, I can see this image of us just like dancing and laughing in the living room. And kids that I don't know yet. And that was kind of this like beacon of like healing hope. It's like a hope feeling that I have had in my mind, and like it was this experience that I so much wanted to have with my own mom that I never got to have. You know, she was a party person, and she was really silly and fun, and liked to have a good time. And when she died, I kind of lost that access to that experience, access to that kind of joy. And I always just had this memory or this image of me doing this with a child in a way that I wish I had been able to do. And as I've gotten older and things have, you know, solidified a bit more in my life, it's still kind of this way of like breathing in and out of my consciousness. But, you know, bodies have changed, and my whole feeling about, you know, being parents and stuff has changed. But in that time, I have gotten to know my mom more through spirit work, and it's like this memory that didn't really exist and my action memory has kind of become like this little joy expression that we share in our kind of spirit connection now. And it's like, I feel like I'm not able to, there's a lot of reasons why I don't want to think about pre-Saturn return. There's a lot of trauma, and there's a lot of me not being in my body, and me not being in my heart, and not being connected with my soul. And I know that I've grown from those experiences, and I know that they needed to happen for what they needed to happen for. But when I think about building or growing or like projecting into the future, it's so hard to look back on the stuff that's actually made me to this moment because it's been so raw. But then I have this kind of like daydreamy, like black girl joy moment that just like hovers in my consciousness that I get to kind of share with my mom ghost. And it kind of, it's moved from this thing that I remember that didn't happen into this future, just like playtime, like just like this future moment is this symbol and signification of like it's possible for us to experience together even though we're not on the same plane anymore, even though we're not bodies next to each other anymore. And I thought that I wouldn't really be able to have a relationship with my mom because she had died. And now that I've just found ways to do that through magic and being my weird self, it's like I know I'm gonna meet her again, and I feel so firm with that. Like it's kind of really exciting. It's like, oh, maybe I'm gonna make up this dance because when we hang out in 400 years or 30 years or in my dreams, we're gonna have this awesome dance to dance. And yeah, I really look forward to my experience of time travel because it'll be really cool to dance with her again.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I will answer your questions now.
That was so great, Jessica. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm just gonna share this link if anyone wants to listen to it later. There you are.
Beautiful. I have a question from Donald Lawrence. I'll just read it verbatim.
Okay.
Jessica, thank you for your talk and contribution to luminosity. The location that Charo and Zoe have cited your work in, a sort of rough space between two buildings with a path, grass, etc., resonates really nicely with the ideas of wilderness and the semi-wild of the Scarborough Walk that you mentioned at the beginning. It looks really good there. Did you have a discussion with the curators about this location for your work?
Yes, we had, I can't wait to see photos of it installed. We had extensive conversations because in a way it started because of technological things. Like it's really hard to communicate how you want things to look when you can't physically be there with the work. I'm sure in a world that wasn't in a pandemic, I would be like, why don't I just go to BC? So Chara was incredibly generous. We had extensive like back and forth, and we contemplated innumerable sites. So yeah, that was there was a lot of going on there between, would we do projections on the surface? Would it be LED screens? A screen versus a projection are two distinct things, as I've talked about with some of the video works here. So yeah, it's kind of, from what I understand and what I can see of the site, you know, it's kind of in this site where that's maybe slated for development at some point, but it's derelict. There's maybe a building that was demolished there at some point. You have this wildlife wilderness kind of coming through the like cracks, like, and I've always found kind of whether they're invasive species or natural species kind of coming up through the concrete, there's this resilience there. So the site, when they came to me with images of this site, like while they were location scouting, I was like, oh, that's the place. So yeah, thank you for asking that. There was a lot of discussion.
We had a very unusual, somewhat significant snowfall the day of the opening, and it was very magical watching the video with
really
the
nice to hear. When the one shoot in the kind of final scene, there was a really terrifying windstorm that was kind of like torrential downpour, and so there were actually like acorns and things that were like flying around, like hitting us in the head and stuff. It was, but it made for great cinema.
Yeah. Someone had their hand up at some point during the presentation. Did you want to share your question with us now?
Oh yes, I said I would answer that question by Jordy, I think it was.
That's right. Maybe they'll want to send a question to us through email later.
Yeah, that's fine. I answer through email too sometimes.
Oh, we've just received 2 more questions. So from Charo Neville, sorry, I know her. So anyway, can you speak to the difference of the scenes, sites in the video?
Yeah, of course. So they're all more or less around the same sort of location. Like, so the creek was kind of the original space that I was drawn to. Not that I wanted to imitate this scene from this film, but I just knew it's kind of the last scene where we're by the water. There's a close-up shot in the one channel, and the other channel is from a distance like that. We actually wore like rain boots and walked through the water to get to like this location for like the perfect shot. Like there was no way we weren't going to get wet. And the first location was kind of more in the bush, like these reeds were sort of like all around us. And then the middle scene was kind of I guess like what do you call it? Grasslands kind of like landscapes. So one was an open field, one was more near the kind of bush or like the woods or forests, and then another was by the water. And I don't know what to really say except that there's something there about the sort of elements. I grew up not on the lake because I did not grow up wealthy, but in proximity to Lake Huron. Different geographic contexts entirely, but they're always areas that I'm very drawn to. For some reason, I always find myself near these locations. Even when I lived in British Columbia and on Vancouver Island, I lived a 5-10 minute walk to the ocean there. So yeah, it's just, it's hard for me to articulate the why, but I guess it has a lot to do back with that idea of the absented presence. Just my experience, my embodiment is one that is a rural or proximity to the rural. I did not grow up in an urban sort of space at all. And what being working class, what being Black in these spaces, what it means is something very different. And maybe, I don't know, I haven't found a lot of, I'm sure it does exist, but I haven't found a lot of intellectual, like I haven't found a lot of writing on it. I was searching for it all the time when I was looking for representation or for something to articulate what that embodiment was sort of like. And yeah, like that searching could be literally, I was talking in another group discussion about being a young person in our house. Like the attic was split in two. It was my parents' bedroom and my sisters and I shared a bedroom on the other side. And I remember we'd get like Detroit radio stations, and for me to like be able to listen to the R&B or these things that I wanted to listen to in my bedroom space, which is kind of like a sanctified space of escape. Like even in the Carefree performance that we did, everyone was performing in their bedroom. So actually, Mark, this is going to tie the two questions together. How does COVID impacted your work? It actually brought nostalgia. Yeah, nostalgia does come up a bit, but I have a contentious relationship with nostalgia. How the work is impacted by COVID. It is and it isn't. I mean, no one can see live work. So, I mean, there's some things where I will compromise and other things where I'm like, maybe it's not meant to happen right now. But with that Carefree performance, because I was working with digital archives, it very easily translated to the digital, and then the liveness. I just had people sign into their webcams or through their phones in their bedrooms, in their personal spaces, which is no different than how we communicate each other, how we FaceTime one another, when we leave voice notes for one another, these kind of intimacies. So there was a thing that we were creating, co-authoring and curating, myself and the activators that I chose. And I didn't even need dancers. I just asked people to write me like a letter of intent, which is really just, I just want a love letter. Like, why does this piece speak to you? And then I just, like 5 people wrote me letters, and I extended invitations to all of them. Only 4 of them were able to, but what happened was we were creating in this kind of virtual or psychic space, but then we're also in the intimacies of our personal home spaces. Like I'm in this shared office room with all of these, my roommates' plants right now. So that's kind of how it impacts it. You just adapt, and then other than that, it gives me a lot of time for introspection or to kind of germinate on ideas. And I don't know about the future, what my work looks like. I'm just taking it one foot in front of the other.
That's all anybody can do, hey?
Yeah.
Well, this has been really, really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for lending me your senses.